Hello and welcome to the 15-minute show, part of the Arsenal Therapy podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam Keys. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to have a bit of a scouting report on Thomas Partey. The news is that he's set to be back for either Burnley or within the next week or so. We know it was a minor setback this time, which has kept him out since the City game, but we hope to have him back in action very soon, as we know what a top player he is. But firstly, thank you to everyone that's joined us, and please make sure to hit the like button on this video, hit the subscribe button on the channel. Please help us continue to grow the way you have done. Our last video on Jurriën Timber was the most successful video we've done to date, and we hope to keep bringing you more, keep growing them and making them better with each week. So without further ado, let's get going on Thomas Partey and have a proper discussion on what we have been missing without him in the team. So obviously we have seen the training pics that have been shared by Arsenal. Arsenal did an update a couple of weeks ago. Thomas is back. We were all excited. We were all hoping to have him back in the squad for the Liverpool game. And then we got the news that he had had another injury setback, which was obviously extremely disappointing news for everyone, because we know what an incredibly talented player he is. And just to put it into context, this first graphic that you'll see, this is Arsenal's win rate with and without Thomas Partey last season. So with him in the team, 73.3% win rate. Without him, 47.1%. That's an incredible drop-off. This season, with Declan Rice in the team, we haven't experienced that. We've been a very, very different side. We've got a supremely talented six, someone who's genuinely at that world-class level. And the frustrating thing with Thomas Partey is, if he was fit on a consistent basis, he would be in that world-class category. The issue is he can't maintain his fitness long enough to truly establish himself within that group of players, within the likes of Rodri and Rice and so on. And we are extremely lucky that we have managed to get Declan Rice, because with Thomas Partey's importance to the team, you can see the drop-off when he's not in it. What he offers in the middle of the pitch is something that not even Declan Rice can offer. They've got very different qualities, and they're players who bring different things to this Arsenal team. So this is why I'm so excited to have Thomas back in the team. He's a player that offers something different to Rice, and that makes them incredibly exciting to play together. And we've only seen it once this season, with the two of them truly playing in midfield, and that was in the Community Shield. But firstly, let's have a look at him last season. So his heat map, he played 33 games. He started 28 games, played an average of 76 minutes per game, and he was in the team of the week once. But if you look at his heat map, he is the definition of a centre midfielder. It's so heavily congested. Those big red marks all over the pitch, that is the areas where Thomas spends most of his time. He's a central anchor in the team. He's someone that really plants himself at the base of midfield. He plays those passes. He wants the ball. He carries it through the middle. He's not a player that drifts out of position. He is someone who is incredibly disciplined in that area, both on and off the ball. He understands the six rule, and he took time to learn that. It wasn't an overnight transition into playing as a lone six, but also you have to look at the team around him. And this is something, when Zinchenko came into Arsenal, a lot changed, because it wasn't just a player playing as a true lone six. We always had that double pivot coming in just a different source. So now it comes from a fullback inverting. With City, it quite often comes from the likes of John Stones stepping into midfield. But Thomas is someone, he is very, very disciplined, which is no surprise given that he came from Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid. But when you look at Thomas's stats and where he ranks in the amongst Europe's top midfielders, these stats have been taken against midfielders from the top 5 leagues in Europe. So he is in the 95th percentile for touches, 26th percentile for shots attempted, which, to be honest, I'm fairly happy with, given that we saw when Thomas used to shoot a lot how unsuccessful he was on a regular basis. When he sort of calmed down the number of shots he was taking and started being more picky and choosy about when he shot, the goals started coming at a bit more of a regularity. And that's why 36th percentile for goals scored. Aerial duels won, 69th percentile. Defensive actions 53, chances created 39. None of these stats, other than the number of touches, really scream out and jump off the screen here, which is why with Thomas, you have to look at kind of what he does on the pitch, where his actions occur, how his movements take place. And most importantly with Thomas is his body shape. That is something that you just can't really replicate with another player. A lot of that is kind of natural. It's coached at a very, very early age. And this is what I'm talking about. This is a clip from when we played Chelsea a few years ago. Top one is when he starts to receive the ball. He's got two Chelsea players running at him, takes the ball very quickly, opens his body out into the half-turn position, and off he goes. He beats two Chelsea players in essentially one touch. One touch to open his body. That completely kills the two of them, draws them towards him, and then another to push the ball away and move himself away. Now, that immediately gives him the option at left back. He has drawn two Chelsea players to him and opened the pitch up for Arsenal. That is a high-risk type of football, and it's something that we saw that worked against us at West Ham last year. But we can see it again here. It's an example against Fulham last season. Top picture is when he receives the ball. The second one, the one below, is him basically the touch up over the defender, and the third picture is him moving away, and you look at the space he's got into. So these are the kind of things that Thomas Partey brings to the team, and we don't see that from Declan Rice. Declan is much more of a player. He gets the ball. He is more secure in how he brings the ball on. He more often takes it square on as opposed to on the half turn the way Thomas does. And he's more of a physical protector of the ball, whereas Thomas is someone that I've talked about having feather feet before. He is so light on his feet. He is a big, powerful player, but he has got the feet of someone at times almost like a Santi Cazorla in the way he can just move the ball between his feet, how quickly he can manipulate the space. And space manipulation is something I've talked about a lot with him. He's someone that has got the ability to use his body without touching the ball and open things up. And someone who's extremely good at that is Sergio Busquets. Busquets is the master at it and is probably the best we've ever seen doing it. And Thomas is someone that has got some similar traits to that on the ball. He is one of the few players who can receive and beat a man without seeming to having done anything, in the way he just kind of takes a step back, drops that shoulder, and completely takes a man out of the game. Sometimes you'll see a little Cruyff turn. Sometimes it is literally just a drop of the shoulder and push off with the opposite foot. And that's something that's incredibly difficult to do. But to the kind of the average viewer, the generalist, that looks so easy. And if it was that easy, everyone would do it. When you've got two defenders coming at you and you just sweep away with relative ease, that is something that few players on this planet can actually do. And again, this is an example of kind of what he does on the ball. And this is taken from the Community Shield. This is, as you can see on the screen, this is 99 minutes on the clock. So this is a time where first game of the season, mentally, it's getting quite taxing at this stage. The players haven't played competitive action for a couple of months, and we're chasing a goal. So it's right before the whistle's going to go. As you can see, there was 8 minutes added on. Thomas has got a bandage around his head, which you can see in the pictures. And that is the reason why it's gone over the clock before anyone points that out. So Thomas is on the ball. He's one of the deepest players on the pitch. And you can see from the picture where I've mapped out the arrows. These are options that most players look at, especially at this stage in the game. It's right. You've got your man to your left. You've got a player out on the touchline, and you've got a player straight ahead of you, which looks like Emile Smith-Rowe in this graphic. And there are three very obvious passes. Given his body position, the long pass out to the wing is probably, he'll be starting that with a static position. Generating that pace is difficult. The easy options are playing it straight ahead of him or just sweeping it sideways, that diagonal sideways, slightly forward to the man, who is then running into two players. But no, Thomas Partey, as you can see on the graphic on the right, he doesn't think that way. He's very, very vertical in his thinking, how he passes, and it's the way he can bend his foot around the ball. It's how he can open his body to really draw players towards him to help open that space. And as you can see from the graphic on the right, Rodri starts to move to close down the player who's the obvious one to play the first pass to. That creates the space for Partey to see Ødegaard, who's dropped into that hole that we always like to see him in. And as you can see behind him, Nketiah has started to move further out onto the right. Thomas outside of the right boot, plays that ball into Ødegaard, and eventually that ball builds up for an Arsenal corner, to which Leandro Trossard scores. This is just an example of the kind of passing that we see, and this is a very specific move in a game where we're playing against the best team in the world, and Thomas still has that kind of like clean thinking, that very clear head at this point of the game, that he can play those vertical passes. And that's something that we don't even see from Declan Rice. Declan is an incredible player. He is someone that we do see more in the horseshoe. We see him sweeping those passes round. We don't see him playing those cute passes in that really break the lines in the way that Thomas Partey can. And a big part of that this season has been down to game state and how teams have lined up against Arsenal, in that we faced lower blocks than we did last season. We're playing with much more kind of numbers in the opposition half. So if you look at the Forest game, for example, Forest had at times 10 players inside their box, with Chris Wood the furthest advanced, he was 10 yards in front of the box. Last year, Thomas did have the advantage of playing in more transitional games, and you can see just how much he can open up a game against the likes of Man City here. We saw it in the league as well. He came on and he made a huge difference. He played that ball into Kai Havertz, and that ultimately led to the goal against City. Or actually, it was into Tomiyasu and then onto Havertz. But again, this is just an example of what Thomas brings to the team. And earlier in the season, after this game, we saw him play at right back. And this is an example of his pass map. If you look at the number of forward passes, so this stat has come from Canon Stats, brilliant site run by Scott Willis, who works for the Arsenal Vision pod as well. But this is a brilliant example of his touch map. But what's really insightful about this is Thomas was playing as a right back in this game. And Arteta got so much criticism for using Thomas Partey at right back, but actually, as the heat map shows, Thomas's position was heavily congested in the middle of the park, and his heat map is very, very light red down the right-hand side of the screen for Arsenal. He was no more of a right back than Jordan Henderson was whenever he was playing for Liverpool and covering for Trent. Thomas Partey was very much playing in the middle of the park for Arsenal. And that's why his passes originate from around the halfway line in most of his actions. He gets the ball, he's looking forward, and everything is going forward with Thomas. He's not a player that wants to get the ball, play it sideways. He doesn't think that way. He's a player that wants to open up the game with every action he does. And again, if you look at the number of defensive actions he's had to carry out, they are more right side biased. They do occur. He's got a number of them down the right-hand side. But again, this is no different to a normal player who's playing in a double pivot and covering the right side, dropping into that area to cover, make tackles. And if you look at the number of kind of defensive actions between blocks, tackles, and so on that he's had to make, it is relatively low, which suggests using him as a right back was actually a very valid experiment for Arteta. And we've now seen Ben White move into that area and thrive against West Ham, where he was inverting and Kivior kept the shape on the left. So this could be something that we see again with Thomas being used as a right back when he comes back. So please don't shut down Arteta if the idea comes again, because as we can see from this heat map, just because the lineup on the screen when you turn on your lineup app, whatever it is, Sky Sports, whatever it is, Thomas may be listed as a right back, but go and look at the heat map after the game. Look at where the players' main actions occurred. Where are they most congested on the pitch? That will give you a better insight into what a player has actually done than what a bit of paper has said before the game. And again, if you look at the Fulham game, again, this is Thomas playing as a right back. Look at where his actions occur. This one he is more on the right side. So in this game, he did start off being used much more as a right back. And this is where it was maybe the wrong option to use him in this game. The first this game started pretty badly for Arsenal. Thomas played a back pass where it was a mix-up between him and Saka, and ultimately Pereira got in and scored, put Arsenal 1-0 down very, very early into the game. Ruined my day. I was at Leeds Fest watching this game in the middle of the pit, streaming a game mid-afternoon, and obviously Fulham drew 2 each with us. But this action itself was completely down to miscommunication by two players that aren't used to playing with each other in that position. And I don't believe it was Thomas Partey's fault. I don't believe it was Bukayo Saka's fault. I think this was just one of those gelling issues, because it's important to remember Thomas didn't play as a right back or an inverted right back in pre-season. That was something I believe came about because of Gabriel potentially going to Saudi. And given Gabriel's interview where Arteta had told him the reasons that he needed to stay, I think a big part of that was because of the doubts over Gabriel's future. However, the experiment itself was a worthwhile one. And again, if you look at the Forest game, so just going back again here are some pictures of the positions Partey's receiving. And first one, 22 minutes into the game, he is between the two centre backs in the left half space of the pitch, and he's getting the ball. He's very much a midfielder there, doing what Zinchenko does from the left. And you can see Rice is ahead of him further on into the left half space of the pitch, more of the 8 position. And then below that, again, we've got Thomas receiving the ball very, very kind of just very much in the center of the pitch. And then the top one, we've got Timber receiving the ball with Partey very much in the center circle, which again feeds into why his heat map is so congested within that kind of center of the pitch. But looking at Thomas's numbers and comparing him with Declan Rice and Rodri, one of the things I found really interesting about this is, so obviously Thomas's numbers are being compared to last season because he's been out all year, Rodri and Rice this season. What has annoyed me this season is because Rice has been so good, a lot of people have knocked Rodri and said tried to claim Rice as a much better player, saying that we're starting to see Rice overtake Rodri. Rodri, in my opinion, is the best 6 in the world, and Rice still has some way to go to get to Rodri's level. That's no disrespect to Declan Rice. That is someone who is playing real positional football, the juego de posición, for the first time in his career, first time playing a high-volume touch game, first time playing a high-volume pass game, and the first time also making less tackles than he's ever made in his career. All these things feed into Rice's development. Rodri, by contrast, has been doing this for 5 years and is a supreme player. But it's also led to people discrediting Thomas Partey. The only negative thing about Thomas Partey is his injury record. As a pure footballer, there is nothing on the pitch that Thomas Partey doesn't offer that puts him anywhere below these two players. But what's interesting, if you look at Rodri is coming out with 125 touches on average per 90 minutes. That is an insane number of touches. But interestingly, if you look at Rice and Partey, there is about 0.7 of a touch difference, or actually, 1.2 of a touch difference between the two of them, between last season and this year, with Partey just aging it slightly. Partey did lose possession significantly more than Rice, and that's something, a big part of what I said about Partey's body shape to receive. It's always on the half turn. It's always aggressive to go forward. It's always adventurous. And that does feed into the ability to lose the ball, which we saw against West Ham last season. But what's really kind of obvious about this is just the number of stats in favor of Rodri. But all three of them have a high passing accuracy. Thomas has the lowest of the three of them. However, he plays more forward passes than Rice. He plays significantly less passes than Rodri. But if you look at it, it's Rodri just plays the most passes on the pitch. He is the kingpin to the Man City team. He's central to everything they do. And on the ball, he is the player that everything goes through at City. Yes, De Bruyne wins them games, but it's Rodri everything goes through. But if you look at the other side of the game, which is the defensive side, interestingly, a lot of these numbers are in favor of Thomas Partey. He makes the most ball recoveries. He makes 3 more than Rice per game, which again is probably down to game state when we're comparing last season. I see him with duels 1. Rice is having to make a lot less duels. So it will be interesting to see these numbers when Thomas comes back and plays in Arsenal's current setup. And he's playing in a really, really high position dominant team where we're on the ball a lot more. So, and again, take-ons, Declan Rice is a carrier. He's not so much a dribbler who takes players on. And that is why Thomas's take-on stats are so good, because as I said, he takes the ball in the half turn. He takes it aggressively, adventurously, and wants to drive forward with the ball. He's always open. The way he takes the ball on is, as I said, high risk, but it can completely open the game. And I go back to that earlier graphic against Chelsea a few years ago. He took 2 players out of the game. We saw that repeatedly, even the City game in the Community Shield, that little pass with the outside of his foot he made that helped open the pitch that led to the corner. Again, it's those sharp movements, those sharp pieces of intellect from Thomas Partey that enable Arsenal to really open the game through those really razor-sharp vertical passes. That is something that Declan Rice doesn't have, but what Declan Rice does have is ultimately much better power going forward or going backwards. Thomas is very good on the burst going forward. He can struggle when it leads to coming back, and a large part of that is down to the number of injuries he's had over his career, which we can see here. This makes for very unpleasant reading. If you look at the number of injuries he suffered at Arsenal, 2 injuries at Atletico, although his minutes were heavily managed during his time there, and he actually played very similar minutes in a much less intense league, in a very defensive team who were very, very structured, playing in midfield with Saul and Koke, and very much a 3-man midfield, very, very disciplined defensive structure. They move as a unit in that cage system, and they go forward as one, they go back as one, they go side as one. At Arsenal, he's playing as a lone 6. He's more exposed. He's having to go forward and back more. He's playing a more adventurous attacking game, but these injuries are still extremely worrying. And the latest one is one of the longest injuries he's had. The only time he's been out longer was in the 2021-22 season, which ultimately, I believe, cost us our Champions League qualification that season. But look, aside from these injuries, he offers so much on the pitch. But I think the talent factor is when you talk about a player that's going to be the kingpin for your team, as I've described Rodri as with City, they need to have a clean bill of health. This is Rodri and Rice's injury records. Declan Rice missed 7 games with illness that he between the Republic of Ireland and West Ham, back when he did play for Ireland. Just have to get that in there. And that was it. 13 days in total that he missed. And he missed a congested period with 7 games. However, Rodri, muscle injury during the 1920 season, missed 18 days, and that was it. So that is what Thomas Partey is coming up against, and they're the 2 main competitors in his position, the 2 people who are really competing with him to be the best in the world. And ultimately, that is the kind of health that we need from a player in that position. That player is central to everything you do in your squad. So with Thomas Partey's injury record, the truth is Arsenal can't rely on him going forward. And that is not down to football reasons. That is down to just that clean bill of health. The hope is we get Thomas back for the remainder of the season after this. I would imagine Arsenal have been very, very slow, very patient, very overcautious with him coming back this time, because the hope is if Thomas is back, he is an absolutely huge player for us to have in the squad. And if he's available for the remainder of the season, he's someone who can really catapult us to another level and just do things that others simply can't in the team. And if you have him and Declan Rice together, no one wants to play against that midfield. So thank you to everyone that's joined up to this point. We have got people viewing live. Please make sure to hit the like button if you're watching right now. And if you're watching later, please, again, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and join us again for more shows. We will be doing more analysis of players like this. and we'll continue to come back for the main pods with post-game analysis, which you can find on Apple and Spotify. Thank you to everyone that's joined. Have a great day. Thank you very much.